So early in my life, I was working in the oil and gas business. I had gone to graduate school, and I had met this young lady in college, and I asked her if she would marry me, and she said yes, but I'm not that thrilled about living in Houston. Houston's a big city, and she also had family obligations in Victoria, where I live now, and so I started looking for a job opportunity. And after I had graduated from college, but before starting graduate school, I had met a gentleman that was the branch manager for Shearson Lehman. And he had offered me a job in the investment business. And I found that to be unusual because I had never taken an investments class and I didn't understand what he saw in me. And so I went back and I tracked him down and talked to him about it. And it was funny. It was really eye-opening because he goes, "Oh, you don't need to know anything about investments. I just need you to sell." And that was the first eye-opener that the investment business was not what I thought it was. But despite that, I thought, okay, if this guy's willing to give me a job offer without really knowing anything, I waited tables. That's how I met him. I used to wait on his family during a summer. And so I started pursuing brokerage opportunities in Victoria, Texas, where my wife was from, and Paine Webber had an office here. It was a one-man office, and it was focused on just taking care of a couple really large families, which were not my clients, but they were trying to insert me into an environment where Paine Webber had existed for 30, 40 years, but nobody knew about it. So no advertising budget, no nothing. But it at least got me into the business. It at least brought me to Victoria. I got married. And so during that time, I learned two things. I learned that I really loved the investment business, and I learned that I hated selling on commission. I started to realize very quickly that there's just tremendous conflicts of interest when you are getting paid under the table for pushing one fund versus another, or whatever the sales promotion of the week was. And I also had learned during that time who Warren Buffett was. So this was the early 1990s. And so it was not nearly as often that an article would be written on Buffett, but every time there was something, I would just devour it and I'd read it over and over and over. But then The Warren Buffett Way was written, and Andy Kilpatrick came out with a book on Buffett, and The Making of an American Capitalist came out shortly thereafter. So like the mid to late 1990s were a really good time to learn about Warren Buffett and really start to have my eyes opened. And so that at least got my toe in the water in the investment business and helped me to start to see the light a little bit in terms of how the industry actually worked. And so during that time period, Victoria, Texas is a town of 60,000, but it acts like it's about 6,000. So people are very, very slow to trust. Maybe if you're there for 20 years, maybe they'll start to do a little bit of business with you, but there's really a barrier to entry that is significant. And so after cold calling everybody in the Victoria, Texas phone book, I just said there's got to be an easier way of doing this. I like the investment business, but I really hate being a broker. And so the oldest bank in Texas happened to be in Victoria. They hired me to be their trust investment officer. They didn't have one before, so I got to develop all their investment portfolios from scratch. They also did not have a brokerage operation, so I got to start that from scratch. And so I spent 4 years doing that before I left May 1st of 1999 to start my own firm. Charlie, I was petrified scared. Anybody who tells you otherwise is just, probably doesn't understand. I had been in the business long enough to know what was at risk, but at the time I had a boss that was asking me to do some unethical things. And it was weird. I was working for a bank, but Glass-Steagall was still in effect, so banks could not be in the brokerage business. So I had all the licenses, but he had all the control. So he was trying to basically force me back into the old brokerage mold of sell the highest commission products. and I was working in the trust department where you're supposed to have fiduciary obligation. I was also working as a broker, and you were also trying to, really uphold your reputation. And you realized very quickly in a small town what Buffett said about it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and minutes to destroy it. And that just made me incredibly uncomfortable. And so I knew I had to get away from this person. And I also realized at the time that it was the mid 1990s, and so the market had just gone up 30% a year for 3 years in a row. And I ended up sitting down with the head of the department, not my immediate boss, but the head of the department. And I said, one of these days we're going to have an uncomfortable conversation with our clients. And he goes, well, what do you mean? He said, the markets are up. Everything's great. And I said, yes, but I said, this is the way I see it. The market averages about 10% a year. We've now averaged 30% a year for 3 years. Sooner or later, we're going to have a regression to the mean, which means we're going to underperform the market. And a client's going to sit down and say, okay, let's review my portfolio. I gave you $1 million. Today, I'm negative $100,000, and I paid you $10,000 for the privilege. Where's the value added? And it made me realize that wealthy people don't just have investment needs. They have taxation needs, they have estate planning needs, they have risk management needs, retirement planning needs, and then kind of a catch-all, just big assets. Sometimes they buy ranches or businesses or whatever. And so my pitch to them was, we really need to be able to answer these types of financial planning questions because they interlock so much with the investment process. You can't have a good investment portfolio if you don't know how it affects all these other key areas of a person's life. And they kind of thought about it, and I think it was a different business model than they wanted to pursue. And so I ended up leaving to pursue an investment business where I could be making investment decisions the way that Warren Buffett had kind of laid out in front of us, but then also to be able to serve kind of as an outsourced chief financial officer, so that if they had a retirement planning question, I could model out what we needed to do to get them from point A to point B. If they had estate planning questions, how do I pass my estate down to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and make sure that it's done in a thoughtful and appropriate manner? Those were all kinds of questions that I found to be very fascinating, and I thought they also added a lot of value to the relationship. Well, so fortunately, I had worked as a broker, for Paine Webber for 3.5 years, and I brought a few of my clients over to the bank. And then I worked at the bank for 4 years. And as you can imagine, it was the oldest bank in Texas. So they had a very long, storied reputation. And that allowed me to have a lot more buy-in than I typically would have had if I had just stayed with Paine Webber. And so when I left, it was a scary time. And I just told my clients, look, this is your life savings. You need to do what's in your best interest. I need to go pursue this business for my own reasons. If I can take care of you and that's the best thing for your family, then I'll do it. But if it's not the best thing, then you guys need to go find a better solution. And so like that. So May 1st of 99, I left. And I also told him, I said, I'm just starting this business. I don't have a staff. I have nobody to answer the phone. I mean, I was filing, I was making copies, I was submitting account transfer forms. I was doing everything by myself. And so recognizing that, I knew that the customer service to my clients was going to be pretty thin. And so I just told them, I said, it's going to take me at least 3 or 4 months to get this straightened out. And it's unfair of you to move your book of business, your life savings to me, and for me to be charging you knowing that I'm not doing the full job that I should be doing. And so I did not start charging my clients anything until September 1st. So I went the entire summer just trying to make sure that the clients were not harmed, that their assets were brought over, that they understood the business model and how we were trying to help them, just to make sure that they were not shortchanged in the process. Maybe more than a few of them. So pretty, I had gone through and I had kind of, I looked at my book of business before I left. I didn't tell them that I was leaving. I didn't want to violate any of those confidentiality agreements, because they were clients of the banks. But they knew that I had left, and I wrote them a letter and just said, this is where I am. And pretty much every client that I thought would follow me ended up following me. And so my goal period was just to be able to make about $60,000 a year. So that's about how much money I was making at the bank. Within the first 6 months, I had already accumulated enough in assets and clients to where I was at least at that level. I just didn't realize that it just was never going to let up. And so my leaving the bank at the time I did allowed me to buy things like Johnson and Johnson and Budweiser and Procter and Gamble, Berkshire Hathaway at a time when nobody liked blue chip stocks. Everybody was chasing after tech, internet, and telecom, and we didn't buy any of those. So when the NASDAQ fell by 80%, our portfolios were actually up that year. And people started to go, okay, maybe this guy actually is somewhat right, or maybe this Warren Buffett guy knows what he's talking about. Maybe we'll trust him a little bit more. And so word started to spread. And for the last 20 years, we've never advertised. All of our business has come simply because of word of mouth. But it was funny. My wife is a very strong-willed person. She's extremely smart. I married way over my head. My wife has 2 master's degrees and a doctorate, and she got all of her graduate degrees while working full time. And so it's very unusual that she is unsure of herself. But early in that first 3, 4, 5 months, my wife sat me down one day and she said, I need to have a conversation with you, and I just need you to tell me the truth. Whatever it is, I can handle it, but I need you to tell me the truth. And it was just a weird way that for her to start a conversation. I said, okay. And she goes, I need to know, are you having an affair? And I was so stunned by the conversation. I wanted to laugh out loud, but I could tell that was obviously not the right response. But I said, the answer is no, but why don't you tell me why you're asking me that question? And she said, you're gone all the time, and all of a sudden you're so happy. And I took a step back and I went, wow, that's right. Because certainly the first 2 to 3 years, I worked the better part of probably 80 hours a week, 7 days a week. I did not take a vacation for the first 7 years. It was just, I worked nonstop all the time. And so to a wife who's sitting at home wondering, okay, why is he so happy all the time, but he's never here? I could understand where she was coming from, and I really felt sorry for her. So I made sure to set aside a little bit of time to make sure that she knew I still loved her. But it identified how driven I was in those early years. I remember reading that Bill Gates did not take a vacation for like the first 10 years of starting Microsoft. My path was very similar. I was just 7 days a week. And on the weekends, I would actually get up even earlier. I would just wake up at like 4 in the morning, and I'd lay there for 30 minutes, and then I go, okay, well, I'm going to go to work. And I'd work from like 4:30 in the morning till 7 or 8 at night. And I was 32 years old when I started the business. I was just a working machine. I just never stopped. Well, and that's just it. I've talked to other entrepreneurs that in the early years, that is what it takes. That's the sacrifice that is necessary. There's no such thing as 8 hours a day. It's you do whatever it takes. And especially for people trusting me with their life savings, I mean, that was just such a sensitive issue. There's nothing more intimate to discuss with strangers than their finances. And so I used to have a pager, like drug dealers back in those days. And so that was the first time I bought a cell phone. So I had voicemail at the office, but then it would roll over to my pager so that I would answer phone calls 24/7. And that was my my promise to my clients is I don't have a big staff. I don't have all these people behind me, but I will answer your phone calls 24/7 and certainly emails too. To this day, we don't have voicemail at my office 20 years later. If you call my office and it's after hours, it still rolls to my cell phone and I still answer it 24 hours a day. Just because sometimes we've had clients who've had strokes, people have lost their credit cards and they're traveling overseas, people have died, and even if I don't think they need to talk to me at 2 a.m, if they think they need to talk to me, that's been our commitment to our clients. You trust us with everything, we will take care of you. Yeah. So I had set myself a goal of making $100,000 a year by the time I was 30. And if I had stayed at the bank, that was not going to happen. So I was making 100 grand a year by the time I was 32. Yeah. So in my first year, I was able to make the 60,000 I thought I was going to make, but then more. Certainly. I mean, that's a great comment that you've made. If you look at the brokerage business and even the way that brokerage statements are produced, they're very hard to read. And clients know they're being charged something, but they can never nail it down in the brokerage business. And so every month, at the end of every single month, we send our clients a statement that says, hey, you finished with a balance of $3,248,000, whatever it is. Here's the fee schedule. Please take the time to review this. And if you agree with it, we're going to deduct the fee 10 days from now. We want there to be 100% transparency just because we recognize the rest of the financial services industry does not operate that way. And so we thought not only was that the right thing to do, but it was a great differentiator in the way that we operated. There's so many, things that you wish you could have done differently. I would say that the majority of them all had to do with how we built investment portfolios. I never realized early on how much the psychology of managing people and their money would play into what we do. So, that is one of the unusual things about our business. We might be a wealth management firm, but we are just as much a psychology firm. So spending time talking to people about their money and then building portfolios that actually get them from point A to point B is a big deal. And so in those early years, I don't think that we were as good as a financial analyst in terms of knowing what would blow an investment up. And so as we've gotten older, we realize our clients have one opportunity to make their pool of money last the rest of their life. And as a result, they can't afford to be swept out to sea and taken out of the game. So you end up building portfolios that serve multiple masters. So typically our clients hire us to manage their emergency money, their cash flow money, as well as their growth money. And in doing so, you've got to think a lot more about their debt loads and the types of things that will harm a business. And I just don't think we were as skilled early on to have been able to identify those things. And I also think that caused some returns to not be as good and some of the returns to be more volatile than they should have been because we invested in things that had more debt than they could sustainably handle from an operational perspective. Well, sure. In an ideal world, I wish I was 35 years old again because I could work 100 hours a week and get 4 hours to sleep. I'd wake up the next morning and I was good to go. At 52, I can tell you I need a lot more sleep. So, take that for what it is. Hopefully I'm smart enough to hire smart people around me that help me to replace raw energy by having additional bodies, and that builds a stronger team. But, the business has also changed an awful lot after 2000, 2001, and especially after 08, 09. The world of cybersecurity has become very, very complicated. So my business partner, who's been with me 18 years, Warren and I used to sit down and we would talk about compliance ourselves. And how do you make sure that a client is taken care of? And occasionally throughout the years, there would be a time when we would make a mistake on a trade, and we felt that we shortchanged a client. So we'd identify, how we had shortchanged the client, identify the financial harm, go to the client with basically a write-up and say, we made a mistake in the management of your account. We think you were shortchanged by $3,200. Is it okay if we work for free until we work off that shortchange? And most clients were just incredulous that we even came to them and said, we've identified this. So usually if you go to people and say, we made a mistake, they're very, very forgiving. That was easy for Warren and I to sit down and kind of solve the compliance issues. But now you've got a whole host of cyber-related issues of how do you know that your client's data is safe? How do you know that if you custody with Schwab or TD Ameritrade, how do you know that Schwab and TD are on top of cybersecurity? There's just a whole host of additional layers in the overall compliance realm that requires us to bring in a lot more consultants and third-party vendors to help us. And of course, in the first year we were managing, $30 million. Today we manage more than $750 million. So, the complexity in the industry has gone up, but also the assets we manage and the number of relationships we manage has also gone up quite a bit. Definitely some responsibilities. I'll tell you that entrepreneurship and owning, I don't want to say that I own the business. I think the business actually owns me. But I still, if I'm in town Saturday and Sunday, I roll out of bed. I come to work. I have worked 7 days a week for more than 20 years. But, like Buffett says, find your passion. I have found my passion. I love what I do. I love the people that I work for, and I love the people that work in our team. They're just that phenomenal. So there's 6 full-time, and then we have 3 interns, and sometimes that increases or decreases. Charlie, that is a great question. What temperament do you look for? Because it's not a skill set. I mean, lots of people are very, very smart, but I think you have to have compassion. You have to have the desire to ethically do the right thing, but you also have to be calm in the face of fire. Because, when the market's going down and the news is telling you that the world is coming to an end, I don't care if it's Trump is going to be impeached or 08, 09 is going to bring the economy down or the Russian election. There is always something to pull at people's emotions. And it's our job to reel them back in a calm but respectful manner and help them to understand this is how your portfolio is positioned and this is why it works, regardless of who's president, regardless of recessions or things of that nature. And that calms them down. So you've got to have a very calm personality to be able to respectfully explain to people what their money is doing and how it's going to get them from point A to point B. So people have asked me, what was your best moment and your worst moment in 20 years of operating? And it was both the same time frame, and it was 08, 09. So going into 08, I think we were at 165 million in assets under management. And in March of 09, we had dropped to 95 million. So what was interesting about that, obviously, a lot of that was just the market dropped off by 60%, well, our assets would also decline too. But during that time frame, we lost 3 clients who just said, take me out of the market. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to be in cash. And we had 3 other clients that fired us and just said, I'm out of here, just done. The rest of our clients all stayed with us. So that was an incredibly difficult time because Warren and I, all of us who were working here, we would get to the office between 6:30 and 7 in the morning. And pretty much for the next 12 hours, it was a nonstop carousel of calling clients and saying, don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. It's going to be okay. I don't know when it's going to be okay, but none of this makes sense. And so Warren and I realized that we should have been making better investment decisions or at least doing more investment research, but the best investment platform in the world didn't do our clients any good if our clients didn't understand the benefit. So we had to spend just as much or more time on the psychology side of it, helping them to understand, why should I hang in there when the news is telling me the world is coming to an end? I'm not sure that it's changed a whole lot since the very first day. I enjoy the independence, but like I said, the business owns me, so it's not like I'm on the golf course. I don't golf, I don't hunt, I don't fish, I work. I like to work, and in my free time, I like to teach. And so I teach at my alma mater, Texas Lutheran. That's my fun time. And so the business allows me the flexibility to go volunteer my time on behalf of university students. The business also offers me financial flexibility. My wife and I still live in the same house we've lived in for 19 years. We still buy used cars. It's just, I don't think a whole lot of who we are has changed, but it's nice not having to worry about whether or not the mortgage payment is, whether or not we have to hold that check a little bit longer. I mean, so there's financial flexibility that comes with it. And then there's the people side of it too. I've gotten to watch Warren, had one child when I hired him. He's now got a second child. His oldest daughter's now in college. You just realize that, 20 years, everybody has grown up. And you see some of the people that have come into our world, and some of them have passed away, and yet we're still involved with their families. It just, so many wonderful things have happened during this time frame. It's nice to be able to spend developmental time with your staff and watch them grow as individuals. So one of the ways that we have been able to identify people to work in our group is through the program we teach at Texas Lutheran. So I used to hire people, through Indeed or things like that. Lots of people have different skills that could work in our environment, but it's really more that temperament. And so when they are one of my interns for 2 or 3 years, I get to take them for a test drive every single day. And so 2 of the people that work full-time for us now, they came through that program, and then a third one went to the University of Texas, but he used to drive down every Friday just to sit in on our class, just because he was intrigued by it, and he couldn't get access to something like that at the University of Texas as an undergrad. So you get to see an awful lot. You get to spend a lot of time with people. You get to learn about what makes them tick. You get to figure out how hard you can push them, what their buttons are. And at the end of the day, it makes me sleep really well at night knowing that I'm surrounded by people who actually care, and they're all a lot smarter than I am, which is cool too. If you want to get better at anything, if you want to get better at tennis, you don't play people that are worse tennis players. You play people that are much better. And the people that work here, they are all much smarter than I am. I think a lot of people make this business really hard, and I don't think it needs to be that hard. I am blessed that I get asked to speak at different conferences and things like that. but I'll tell you, it's actually quite intimidating to be on a stage, because I can tell you that pretty much everybody who is successful in this business, they are much smarter than I am. And so I do think that having a level of humility for all of us is very, very important. I think this business is as much about discipline as it is about IQ points. And as our business has progressed, we have spent a lot more time thinking about what not to do as opposed to what should we be doing. And so if you don't go where the landmines are, you don't blow yourself up. The people aspect and the psychology aspect, that goes hand in hand with the money. For us, we're very intrigued by business models and why one succeeds and one fails. We're always intrigued by being able to buy an investment at the right price, be able to think through the problems. Today, McKesson has all sorts of issues. Johnson & Johnson has all sorts of issues. Boeing is another one. We've kicked the tires on that. We try and figure out, does that fit in our portfolios? And then how do you put that in there, the actual operational aspect of it across 1,000 plus accounts and $750 million. But then ultimately understand you've got to be able to explain it to a client. So unlike a pooled relationship where everybody just throws their money together, our clients all have individual accounts. And so our clients see what we are doing in their portfolio real time every single day. So it will prompt those conversations a lot more often. Client will say, why did you buy me this? Why did you do that? I like Fox News. I hate Fox News. It's just funny to see the things that will really motivate people. So the psychology of getting people to understand why they've got money and what their money does for them is really important. For us, it's a very different layer of structuring the money to make sure that it actually gets that client from point A to point B, which delves much more into the actual business model of investing. I think that we spend a lot of time reading about as much as we possibly can. And when I talked about, playing tennis players that are a lot better than you, Warren is just a voracious reader. Warren, this morning, he came in and asked me if I had read an article on aluminum air batteries and how revolutionary that was going to be to alter electric cars. I mean, that forces you out of your comfort zone. You then start having to think about how that's going to be relative to lithium ion batteries, or, a variety of those things. So reading is just hugely important for all of us to try. I find that to be very interesting, but last week we spent time looking at LKQ, which uses a variety of salvage yards to provide auto parts to the insurance remanufacture process. And to me, it's a fascinating business, but at the end of the day, it's one that we just said, okay, I learned something, but I don't want to put that in portfolios. And we've had similar conversations about Wells Fargo recently. We really like their new CEO, but I'm not sure that Wells Fargo's problems are behind them. Boeing is a really good one. We've had a lot of discussions about Boeing, and yet we're not going to put it in portfolios. And so if you go back and you read Buffett's stuff, and this is the program we teach at Texas Lutheran, it's right exactly what we do day in and day out. Do you understand the business? Is it predictable? And is it consistent? And so Buffett has openly said that when you narrow it down, the world of investing down that much, you're probably looking at 250 different companies that might actually go in a portfolio. It doesn't mean that you don't read about all sorts of different stuff. So being curious, being intellectually open to new ideas, why something will work, why something doesn't work, I think is just hugely important, because otherwise you won't see turns in the market. So we did own McKesson earlier. We sold McKesson because we could not figure out what was going to happen with the opioid litigation. When you see something that is not predictable and consistent, the discipline part says you should take a step back and move that out of a portfolio. Simpler choices trump complex choices. So there's a lot of very smart people in the business. The smart people like very complicated answers. We find that our greatest successes come with the simplest answers. Number one, I just hope I have my health. If you've got your health, then you can get up and your day is what you make of it. When we celebrated our 20th anniversary, I wrote all of our clients a letter that basically said, thank you, number one, for the opportunity to work for you. Number two, I informed them that the other 5 people that work here are now owners of the firm. So I am no longer the only owner. For me, that was very, very important. We get hit up probably once a month, but seriously once a quarter by somebody wanting to buy us. And I wanted to send a very loud and clear message that the firm was not for sale. The people that have brought me tremendous success, they all reside right here with me, and I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And I also said that I have already set a date on my calendar for the year 2039 or 2049 rather. That will be when our firm celebrates its 50th anniversary. I will be 82 years old, and I hope that I will still be behind my desk making a meaningful contribution, and I hope that I will be surrounded by people that I really respect and really admire. To me, when I look at Buffett, the guy's 89 years old. He still enjoys coming to work. He still enjoys the intellectual process. He enjoys the people around him. I hope that I will be as lucky to have good health, which brings longevity, and then to continue to have that motivation that Saturday morning, I want to be at the office. Sunday morning, I want to be at the office. There's a big enough team around me to where I don't have to do that anymore. I like to come down here. There's a butt print in my chair that likes to be here every day. I like a little bit of time on the weekends when I can just read quietly. I also write articles. And so just getting to think about how you formulate an article about artificial intelligence affecting deep fakes and what that means to investment research. But then on Monday morning, I enjoy, people being back and the crosstalk of, hey, what about this investment? What about that investment? So I'm hopeful that I can continue to spend a lot of time still in the educational arena. My wife and I, we don't have any children. So when we are both gone, our estate will go to support homeless animals and education. And that's it. And, I have set a goal for myself that I hope I will leave an estate of well more than $100 million to charity. So it won't be Warren Buffett, but I figure in my own special way, I have set that as a goal for myself and for my wife too, that we want to make sure there's a legacy because we've been given an opportunity to conduct ourselves in a free capitalist society. It's certainly not without its flaws, but we've traveled enough to where it's a pretty good deal here. There's many, many other places in the world that are not nearly as great as the United States, acknowledging the flaws. But I can still get up. I can still work hard. I can still find my way. And hopefully I'll get an opportunity to pay that back because there have certainly been just numerous mentors and educators that have been there to teach me along the way and hold me to a higher standard. And the same thing for my wife too. So, it's not about money at this point. So I am to a point to where, like I said, I've lived in the same house for 18 years. We paid $130,000 for the house. It was paid off a long time ago. We drive used cars. Extra zeros don't do us any good at this point. If anything, the extra zeros might allow us to leave a bigger legacy to charity. But I also recognize that the team that is here, this needs to be a group decision. It's not just my decision. If you really want to gain operational leverage, you can't do that rarely just by yourself. there is generally a team that allows you to gain that leverage and do much better than just the horsepower of one person. And so to incentivize them and reward them and hopefully to put golden handcuffs on them, I want them to be the owners. I want them to stay together as a team because they work very, very well together as a team. And I want them all 20 and 30 years from now to look back and say, yep, being an owner of this firm was one of the best things, or if not the best thing, that they've done in their life. I assume that they're all going to have children, and they might rank, their marriage and their children above, owning the firm. But for me, the firm, this is my child. So that's kind of, on par where I put it. So I did not just wake up one day and say, I'm going to leave the bank. It was a very thoughtful, methodical process. And so I sat down and I wrote a business plan for myself. I also spent a lot of time just looking at my clients and thinking about who would go with me. And during that time, I tried to save as much money as I could. So, I really hunkered down. I accumulated about $50,000. And between my savings and my wife was a school teacher, so between that, we kind of thought, okay, this is enough to last us 3 years. So I figured that if I was going to be successful, that 3 years would be enough of a time frame to give me a legitimate shot, and I would know whether or not it was meant to be at the end of that. So the first thing was, realize that best businesses are high return on invested capital. One of the things that I like about the investment business is with a phone and a computer, you can almost set up shop on day one. And that allows you to have just enormous returns on capital. And so it did not take me a lot of money to do that. And then I had one of my clients who said, hey, I always like to help out youngsters, and, I've got an extra space in my office building, and you're welcome to it. So he donated an office for the first 9 months to me, which I was incredibly appreciative of. The other thing just about entrepreneurship in general, one of my favorite books or series of books in the world is The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mind, and How to Stop Acting Rich and Start Acting Like a Millionaire. If you really want to think about where wealth is created in the United States, it is on the back of entrepreneurship. So it's not Wall Street. It is entrepreneurs that are starting a sheetrock business or a salvage yard or a trailer park business, their oil field supply business. That is the backbone of America, and that is what makes America so great. Those are the kind of people that we work for. They are entrepreneurs that are wearing boots and blue jeans, driving Ford F-150 pickup trucks. And what you realize about entrepreneurship is don't judge a book by its cover, because very, very rarely does the entrepreneur wear a suit and tie. Usually they're out in the yard getting dirty and taking care of customers in some form or fashion. Certainly there are some mega wealthy people out in Silicon Valley that have made a lot of money off of software. But what's unfortunate about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's attack on wealth is that I don't think they really understand who the wealth is created by in the United States. You have some true outliers in terms of Wall Street and Silicon Valley, but there's a massive amount of America between California and New York that is really just bread and butter, hardworking people that live below their means and save and save and save for that rainy day, so that when the economy does cycle down, they're well prepared to deal with it. They can expand if the opportunity comes along, but some sort of economic downturn is not going to wipe them out. So they're very careful users of leverage. And that to me is, reading those books just opened my eyes. In terms of me living in South Texas, where the oil field is still very, very prevalent, We work for lots of oil field related companies and oil field related wealth. They are not people that just woke up with an oil well in their backyard. They're people that are delivering oil field services and products all throughout Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico. It's hard work, it's honest work, and at the end of the day, they sleep really well. To me, that's what gives me so much hope about America and about entrepreneurship. That is the kind of thing that allows people to gain independence and to hire people and for GDP to continue to grow. I mean, obviously so much of it started with my parents. So both my brothers are National Merit Scholars. My dad has a master's degree in electrical engineering and my mom's a school teacher. I guarantee you I am the least intelligent person in my family, but my parents never compared me to my brothers. They would just always ask me, did you try your hardest? And I think that gets back to the psychology end of it. My parents were very smart that they knew if they asked me, did you try your hardest? They, being of German, Scandinavian work ethic, they knew that there's always more that you could do, and they expected me to dig a little deeper and work a little harder because they knew that I could outwork most problems. So, I was incredibly thankful for a family that supported me that way. It was not a matter of if I would go to college, but where, because my parents were incredibly frugal. And so they had saved that much. But then every time we got Christmas money or birthday money or we had a summer job, 50% of it had to go into our college savings. So my parents were just huge believers in education and planning for education early. And so you realize that provides a foundation upon which all other things can be accomplished. One of my best friends growing up, he told me not to worry about college. He said, look, you're sure you'll learn some biology and you'll learn some chemistry or whatever. He said, but you go to college because college is a place to learn how to learn. And once you have done that, you can apply it to anything. And you realize that humans are a lot like sharks. A shark stops swimming, it dies. A human stops learning, it dies. And so once you've got that foundation, you just need to set that goal of always going to bed a little bit smarter. Charlie Munger's always preached that. So as long as I've got my health, as long as I've got people that love me, I just this last weekend, I got together with my college friends. We played dominoes all weekend and, probably spent all of $50 for an entire weekend just smack talking, playing dominoes with people that I know that I can be completely myself with. So finding people who love you and accept you for who you truly are, having your health, and having the opportunity to pursue an occupation that allows me to drive my own destiny. I mean, what more does a reasonable person need out of life? When I hired my very first Texas Lutheran student, he was compiling 13F filings by hand and putting the data into spreadsheets. And I can't remember if we saw a blurb about GuruFocus in the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or something, but we reached out to Charlie. And I mean, that was in the early days. Like I said, 2006, 2007, somewhere thereabout. And, it was neat to see Charlie's devotion to this, even though we had a full-time job in a completely different industry. And so there would be some, phone calls back and forth. And Charlie has been so generous. He's always donated a subscription to GuruFocus to my students at Texas Lutheran. And I tell my students every day, I start my day by going to GuruFocus. I end my day by going to GuruFocus. And I tell them, if you are not going to the Buffett Munger screener and the predictable consistent screener at least once a week, you are shortchanging yourself. And I said, Charlie has made this very easy for you. So stay disciplined. And so the platform that Charlie has built is just, it's something that out of all the software we use, I would be very, very reticent to give it up because it's so good. And I know that getting back to the money thing, how much money would it take? I know Charlie's turned down an awful lot of money, probably from Bloomberg, to make him go away, because I think he has, really leveled the playing field and provided information on a much broader scale to people that actually want to use the data and get involved in the data. And so it's so much fun to see your success and for us all to be successful together despite all the problems in the world. So anyway, so it's been a ton of fun.